Oh, anybody out there ready to roll? Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Cameron. All right, let's do a little bond practice here. Just to get everybody back in the swing with bonds. And then maybe Chris will lean on you for question 12. Can you do question 12 for us in a couple minutes, Chris? Good stuff. Okay. This is another area. This ties back to what I talked about earlier when I mentioned questions that take us into stocks and stock options. And now we have a question, or at least a little, this would be more like a level 1 question, but I like to do one question like this so that we can go back and make sure we're comfortable enough with bonds in order that if we have a question like this on the exam, we're not completely stumped. So where am I going to start with a question like this? Well, like with any other time value of money question, I will start with my little draw a line exercise. And what do I know on my line? Okay, it's true. It's always semi-annual with a bond. That's a great starting point, Connor. So we know that we're getting this 4.96% coupon rate. And whatever yield we're getting, that's going to compound semi-annually. Okay. What else do I know? Where does that 984.76 go? Uh-oh, is it? Remember what I said a minute ago? That's actually a future value, right? Remember when I said they're going to have you using the calculator in ways that may not be what you're accustomed to. They'll flip things around a little bit on you. That's 984.76. That's the present value, Cameron, right? $1,000. What else do I know? How long is my line? $6 years, right? That's a 6-year line. And what is the coupon in this case? How would I figure out the coupon? Okay. Now, normally I would do future value for that, right? But really, I'm going to do present value in this case for the value of that coupon. And then exactly right, divide by 2. To get the coupon. And that would be $2.48. $24.80. That's what I said. All right. Good. Thanks, Shelley. And that's paid every 6 months. If you're having trouble with bonds, what you can always do is step back and do the very basics of the bond. And I know this bond would have looked something like this. That's pretty close. Okay. It would have been issued, although I know we don't actually see this anymore, but at one time, this bond would have been issued with a par value of $1,000 and then a series of coupons paying $24.80. And the question then is, what would this bond, what kind of return would this have provided if I bought this for 984? Sorry, if I apologize. I bought this for $1,000. I'm selling it today for 984.76. What return did I generate? Okay. Every bond is really just a question about the value of that cash flow in a certain interest rate environment. And so on and so on. Okay, now I can go and I can figure this out. My PY with a bond, as was already pointed out, 2, and my CY will also be 2. IY is what we're trying to compute for in this particular case. We don't know our yield. Present value would have been negative 1,000. Payment would be positive 24.80. That money would have come to me or to Jared that whole time. And future value would have been 984.76. I know I missed my times PY. And that would be 6. And bonds are always solved on end. Can we figure that out? And everybody should be picking up their calculator right now. Okay. And 4.74. Uh-oh. Now I'll check it myself. Let's see, you've given me doubt here. Yeah, I got 4.74. It is 4.74. I always use times PY, Cameron. I always have. It saves me keystrokes. I'm really getting a calculator to do my work for me. I'm not sure why some of you got 4.48. Which calculator are you using, Shelley? Let's try begin mode. I don't think that's going to do it. No, that's not. It's going to get a higher rate, actually. Let's try both. You have to use both, right? Okay. Your N is 12. N is 12 here. Okay. If you have not ever used times PY, then use N. Okay. If you're not used to using N, don't switch or to using times PY. Don't switch now. Okay. So I don't know what everybody learned in their calculator. I know the easy way to do it, but this is no time to change how you use your calculator. Okay. Yeah, that's it. So if you're either times PY is 6 or N is 12, whichever. So Amrit, I always run 8 decimals, but exam questions will typically just need 2. But I run my calculator on 8 because I don't lose anything that way. Now that accounts for compounding, Shelley, right? But you still have to set your N to 12. 5 is definitely good enough. I wouldn't change anything, Amrit. So when you calculate this 4.74, that is the proper yield. Okay. But what the PY and CY menus do for you, they let you use that shortcut. The PY lets you use the shortcut to get into 12, and the CY is going to properly take into account compounding semi-annually to get you the proper return, the proper yield. Now, I want to point something else out here. And this is a challenge sometimes for people who have never interacted with bonds. The same question, the exact same question, might look like this. This would be identical. We might be told that Jared is selling for $98 and 47.6 cents and bought the bond 6 years ago at par. That is exactly the same question. Because with that 98, no, it's 4 point, Sharon, if you're getting 4.48, your CY is not, or your N is not right. You have to have 12 in your N spot, however you get there. Okay, and that's exactly it. Par would be 100. And the 98.476, think of this like a percentage. It's 98.476% of the par value. And that's actually how bonds are priced on the bond tables. If you look at the bond tables, you'll see everything is based on a unit 100 or a base 100 starting point. This is a perfectly valid question. And again, it's the kind of thing that you can expect on the exam, where it represents how bonds really are traded or how bonds buy and sell. So bond prices are expressed per $100 of par value. Okay, this particular bond, then we would say it's selling at a discount. Whereas I might have a bond priced at whatever, 103. .544, and that would be selling at a premium. Okay, that's all good? Okay, Chris, do you want to crack open question 12 for us? Easy for me to say. And then, while Chris has this one cracked open, somebody else can think about question 13. And I'm hoping we get to the Peter and Cindy case today as well. Okay. So this question, I don't know, a little tougher because of something that I did wrong with this question. I just haven't taken the time to fix it yet. But anyways, what kind of question is this? Yeah, this would be an analysis question, advantages and disadvantages. Okay. What do we think of this first advantage? Tax deferral. We like this one. Yeah, that's with an RRSP. Now, what do we think about the word tax deferral here? This is why people are hesitant? Yeah, I would say that it's important to get this just right, especially when you're talking about the RRSP. And what I would point to here is not a deferral, but a deduction. Okay, there is a deferral, but it's not a deferral on the contribution, although I know you could make maybe a philosophical argument here. Yeah, I would point to deduction versus deferral. Okay, I think that's correct. I think that would get marked incorrectly just because it is not quite the right word. And then I would point over here to the same thing. I think it probably doesn't help that you kind of double down on that questionable language. Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. I don't think you need to use the word deduction here, Melissa. Now, I do want to point to a common error, and this is not what happened with Chris's answer, but a common error here, and I find this is very normal with RSP questions, would be to say they will get a tax refund that they can use to save. Is that a true statement? It might be, right? But we don't know that. That is an assumption. I find that is a very common assumption. Okay, that's it, right? It could just lower their tax payable. We don't know that, Tanner, right? I would just leave that alone. Chris has expressed the rest of this well, and I think, Chris, if you just said deduction here instead of deferral, that would be good. And I know this is picky about the language, but of all the places where it's okay to be picky about the language, the RRSP is probably at the top of that list. you're expected to show an expert level of competency with respect to the RRSP. Let's come back. Sorry. Yeah, that's right, Nelson. But there's a big difference between saying they'll get a tax refund versus it will reduce their taxes, right? Yeah, I guess may generate a tax refund. Jamie, that's pretty wordy. You got a lot of extra stuff in there, though. Okay. I would probably cut that off at generate a tax refund. There's no need to go that extra step. Oh, there. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, in fact, any use of the RSP is really a deferral, right? Tax-free growth would be TFSA. And what do we think about this third answer? Do we like this? I don't think that's an assumption necessarily. I think if you can use an answer that has that behavioral element to it, I think that's valid, Connor. What assumption is Chris making here? I don't think he's making that assumption. I think that might deter them from using it, as opposed to they would spend it recklessly. I think that's a different thing. Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's an assumption. And to say that sometimes people don't do what they're intending to do with their money, I'm not sure that that's actually an assumption. So I don't know. I like this answer. I'm a big fan of behavioral answers in general. And I think that this would be a good one here. Now, a couple of you pointed out the home buyer's plan. Yeah, that's I think a fair paraphrase of that, Connor. Home buyer's plan is another good one. Something like that. Okay. Yeah, I agree, Nelson. So you might have given a couple of answers that refer to the home buyer's plan. That's fine. But no, there's no requirement. If like Chris didn't mention home buyer's plan, that specific thing isn't going to cost Chris marks. However, it's a problem just because it's such an easy answer to give, and Chris really didn't give that answer. Okay. So that it kind of becomes its own punishment that way, I guess, by not including that. It's much easier to explain that than, oh, what'd you get wrong though? I don't understand that comment, Nelson. Oh, I mean, you didn't mention it at all. I see. Yeah, I would specifically talk about home buyer's plan there, Melissa. I think that's appropriate. Oh, I see. I see what you did here. All right. Yeah, I would suggest that, I don't know, it's worth mentioning the home buyer's plan. Now, if I'm grading this and I read that, I say, oh yeah, Chris is talking about the home buyer's plan. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, there it is again, eh? Okay. Yeah, that first chunk is good. I don't know. I know this is kind of a material consideration sometimes when you're doing this, but to me, this last sentence is a little bit, I don't know, it felt like that's adding detail that doesn't need to be there. Okay. Yeah, home buyer's plan, HBP is a perfectly fine acronym, Connor, perfectly acceptable. Okay. In fact, I'll show you in a second here. I'm going to answer a couple of questions. All right. Yeah, that's fine, Melissa. It's a good disadvantage. The fact that it sets back your retirement plan, some version of that. I know, Shelley, well, I would give the benefit of the doubt here. It doesn't matter anyways because the rest of it is messy, but I would give the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, he's talking about home buyer's plan here. But yes, a few of you did this, made the assumption that this was about the home buyer's plan. I think some of you read home buyer's plan here where it says RRSP. And it doesn't say that. Okay. Yeah, it is a little problematic, Shelley. I agree. Okay. I would rather specify. This goes back to my comment a couple of weeks ago. I think that would be a very common type of error to make where you jump to that conclusion and then it'll be hard to see that you made that mistake. Okay, but yeah, HBP would be a perfectly fine acronym to use. Okay. It will grow tax deferred. Yeah, it's fair. I guess if you wanted to be perfectly accurate, you could say any growth would be tax deferred, but I think you'll be okay to say here it will grow tax deferred. Growth or loss is not really the material item of the question. And if I recall correctly, they're using a GIC, aren't they? or a savings account, which provides a steady rate of return. They're not invested in the stock market or in mutual funds. They're making a 1.2% return. Okay. Yeah, I guess, Connor. What do you do, eh? The guide to examinations here. I'll just show you a couple things in the guide to examinations. We looked at this document last time, but right at the tail end, there is your list of commonly accepted acronyms, and home buyer's plan is on the list. You could definitely use home buyer's plan. That is not a problem. Okay. Yeah, and remember, you'll have this, and you'll have this useless formula sheet as well. Okay. And then the calculator question. Read the question, Sharon. Read the question. Okay. That was on my list of 8 things that students do incorrectly. Who just asked me about the financial calculator? Sorry, I can't remember who that was. Anyways, if you're used to using a scientific calculator, the calculator order is the Casio FC200. You can only get it on Amazon. Oh, they don't have it on the list here. Hey, it used to be on the list. Never mind, don't get the Casio. Whew. All right, the calculator order then, if you're used to using a scientific calculator, just get yourself the BA2 Plus. Get this guy right here. Okay. Oh, no, sorry, there. That's what I'm looking for, the Casio. There it is. That's the one I'm looking for. Get this one, Martin. You can't get it at a store. You have to get it on Amazon, but that is the one that functions the most like a scientific calculator. Yeah, FC200. Okay. I've never used the FX300. I don't know what it looks like. It looks like a scientific calculator as well, but I've never used it. Okay, but I own a FC200 and it's actually pretty neat. Okay, that's the one. When I have a student who shows up in Canada having started their CFP studies in India, where they also use the CFP, that's the calculator they all show up with. Okay, do I have a volunteer for question 13? This will be the TFSA version of the same question. No, I'm happy to go on to the Peter and Cindy case. I'd rather spend a little more time there anyways. Okay, go ahead, Melissa. Yeah, that's good. It'll be a short one anyways. And then we're going to do Peter and Cindy, which is case number 6. That's the RDSP question. Oh, you got the wrong question up there. I'm looking for Vanessa and Richard. It'll be Vanessa and Richard. This is Randy and Vanessa. I know I have two Vanessa questions. I don't know what happened there. Any chance of opening up the other one? Just give Melissa a second here. Thank you. It's good. Beautiful. Okay. Thanks, Melissa. That's good. All right. 2 advantages, 1 disadvantage. And you can see I have a little typo here. This is what I said earlier when I said I've got this this problem with these questions. I don't think I have them templated very well, and that can cause problems. 2 marks, but it's really only 1.5 marks. Actually, I should be giving here. Sorry about that. So first off, if the last question was analysis, so are we in analysis here? Okay, what do we think about this first point? Is this good? Tax-free growth? Yep, I would give that. Nice, easy one. And then what about point number 2? It's true. What's the difference between number 1 and number 2? Yeah, I think that's fair, Cameron. I don't think you need to go into a ton of detail. I don't think it's a bad idea to finish a sentence either, though. You sometimes leave something hanging if you don't finish your sentence. What do we think about number 2 here? I don't know. I think it's too close to number 1. They're effectively the same thing. Aren't they both point to tax-free growth? Well, okay, but a withdrawal is, so growth is only tax-free if withdrawals are tax-free, right? Otherwise, the growth is tax-deferred. Okay, is there any other reason to use the TFSA? Okay, so I think that's when we can point to, Tanner. That's an advantage where you put money in and take money out. There's no loss of contribution room. Okay. Yeah, I agree, Malcolm. That's still tax-free growth, right? That all points to tax-free growth. I don't think there's that many good answers to the TFSA. It's really, tax-free growth, no loss of contribution room. You could point to no restrictions on withdrawal, potentially. I don't know if that flies or not, but it might be a good answer. Yeah, that might be it, Nelson, right? Okay, there, I can live with that. That's good. So Nelson and Malcolm team up for a good answer here. And yeah, it gives them liquidity. Sort of the opposite of the behavioral item we pointed to with the RRSP, right? Okay. And no deduction for the disadvantage. What do we think about Melissa's disadvantage here? Do we like it? Is no tax deduction a disadvantage? I think it is. I think that's, if you're comparing to the RRSP, I think that's valid. Yeah, I like that answer. I don't know, what am I missing? Oh, sure. Yeah, geez. All right, fine. I wanted to give you a mark, Melissa, but Troy won't let me. It's true. It doesn't lower your overall marginal tax rate. It just lowers your tax burden. It could lower your marginal tax rate. We don't know that. Okay. You could very easily still be at the same tax rate, right? Yes, that's true. It lowers your average or effective tax rate. Yeah, Sharon, that's a good one. Might spend it somewhere else. It's easily accessible. I like that. Could spend it somewhere else. Okay. Yeah, now we're on to disadvantages. So yeah, those are some good disadvantages. All right, any other questions? No, I think, Terrence, we did that fine. With the RRSP, we pointed to its illiquid nature as an advantage. You with me there? It's two separate answers, Cameron. There's nothing stopping me from using the same disadvantage for both. Okay. The flip side of that, Terrence, is we talked here about liquidity being a potential advantage. I think that that's valid. We don't know how the client's going to behave. If the client is going to maybe make withdrawals when they shouldn't, well, then illiquidity is probably an advantage. But if the client is going to be good and disciplined, well, then that liquidity or that illiquidity is not an advantage, right? Is that double negative for you? Okay. Now, I understand what you're saying. And to be fair, Melissa didn't actually use the word liquidity. That was my word. Okay. So maybe we shouldn't say liquidity, Terrence, because you're right. They're all liquid, aren't they? It's really more about where is it easier to take money out from. So your RSP is fully liquid, but it's not as easy to take money out. The withholding tax, for example, creates a barrier to withdrawals, doesn't it? So you might not want to call that a lack of liquidity. You might refer to simply a barrier to withdrawals. I could buy that. Yeah, that's fair. In fact, I don't think we used the word liquidity when we talked about the RSP, but I did use it here, and I think here it fits. This money is fully liquid. If we're going to talk to an advantage, that is an advantage. Okay, good. All right, how about then have a look briefly at our next scenario, Peter and Cindy. And then I'd like to get through at least the first question with this one. I think we have time. Okay, we have a couple here. We have some levels of income provided. We're told one of them is self-employed and one of them is employed. We have a little description of benefits. We have some kids, and one of the kids diagnosed with neurological condition, recovery not currently likely, but could have a normal life expectancy. Okay, we've got this $10,000 that they allocate every year in this manner. Got a little description of what they've got invested. And we have a description of their house and their mortgage. All right, let's have a look then. Do I have a volunteer for question 14? Anybody have a question 14 ready? How does that add up to 10,000? Yeah, that's 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 plus 5. That's 10,000. Okay, I'm still looking for a, okay. I mean, that happens, Martin. Sometimes I forget about my second child too. All right. Okay, go ahead, Shelley. Yep. Appreciate it. Okay. While we're going over this one, I'd like to think about a volunteer for question 15. Okay, 3 advantages of RDSP. How are we with the RDSP in general? I think this is a good place to put some study time in. I find unless folks have set 1 or 2 up, they often are very uncomfortable with RDSP. All right, first off, what do we think of? Yeah, good, Shelley, that's good. What do we think of Shelley's first answer here? Okay, what is the level of income to qualify for the bond? Oh, sorry, I missed my first part here. What kind of question is this? Nobody stopped me. No way, this is my fault. Okay, this would be an analysis question. We're exploring advantages. That is an analysis problem. Not making a recommendation. Yeah, they make too much money for the bond. And this is exactly what happens with a question like this. I know you know what the threshold for the bond is, but they make, what is it, well over $100,000 a year. That's far too much income. About 45 would be the cap. That's right. That's the problem. Yeah, that half mark is lost now, even though everything else is correct. And that's such a kick in the teeth. But I find it's very normal that people just say bonds and grants, bonds and grants, bonds and grants, when you have to actually step back and say, hang on a second here, is that necessarily true? Okay, I know you knew that, Shelley. As soon as you said, I have a bunch of these, I know you knew. Okay, but you know that income is not less than 45,000, Melissa. I can see their income. That is a great example of a knowledge versus competency answer. What you're saying is technically true, completely irrelevant to them. Okay. How about question 2? What do we think here? That's the whole point of the RDSP. That would be a bad answer not to give, although you wouldn't lose marks if you didn't give it. But hard to criticize somebody for using an answer that really just describes why we use an RDSP at all. And how about question 3? Yeah, that's technically true. It's the year in which you turn 19. Yeah, I think the 3-to-1 is okay, but yeah, you didn't need that, Brian. I'm with you. Yeah, this is, I don't know if you get in trouble for this. Technically, this is true the year in which Yuri turns 19. He will be 18 for a period of that year. Okay. I'm pretty sure I have that right. Yeah, it does depend on family income, but the indication of the question is that he does have a relatively serious disability. I would suggest the likelihood of him making more than $100,000 a year is pretty low. And Shelley does a good job of saying, allowing for potentially higher ratios of the grant. Okay. Yeah, it's just the rule, Brian. Right, except that it's a federal rule, right? This has nothing to do with provincial law. This is a federal rule. And under the Income Tax Act, you are no longer a child in the year in which you turn 19. Yeah, I get that, Shelley. I think you would just find that, no, it automatically switches over, Sharon. Yeah, so what'll happen here with the RDSP is if you have a child who is, let's say, turns 17, in 2019. Okay. Yeah, well, there's 1,000 other questions there, Sharon, right? It's okay to start one before 18, but my bigger concern is never about the bonds or the grants. I don't really care about that. What I care about is this child actually going to be disabled for the rest of their life, and are they going to live a reasonably long lifespan? Okay. So 2019, here we would use the parent's income, and then turns 18 in 2020. And again, we would use the parent's income. And from the perspective of the Income Tax Act, this person is still 17 for a portion of that year, and that's why they're still considered a child. Now, that being said, when do they start to get TFSA room? Right, you get TFSA room on the first day that you hit 18. Okay, so it's a little bit convoluted. The Income Tax Act is maybe not as consistent as we would like, but that's exactly that. That's when TFSA room starts. Yeah, and Shelley, I agree with that. You have somebody who's in that position, absolutely saving a TFSA. You can crank up your level of savings pretty quickly. And then turns 19 in 2021, that's where we would use the beneficiary's income plus their spouse's income if they happen to be married already. Okay, does that make sense? And kind of to your point, Brian, age 18 still is when we start to treat you as an adult. The problem is that for some of 2020, this person is still a child. You see that for at least a few months of 2020 or whatever, one day maybe of 2020, they are still a child. That's where you get that kind of crossover, that inconsistency, or maybe seeming inconsistency. Okay, that's good. Thanks, Shelley. This is a difficult question. I hardly ever see 3 marks on this question. Very, very rarely. It's very easy to stumble or to give an answer that doesn't match the circumstances, or just to kind of quickly spit out an answer that's not right. It's a great example of a question that seems so simple, but there's lots of opportunity to shoot yourself in the foot here. Do I have a volunteer then for question 15? Yeah, I get it, Shelley, right? It's still that's the heuristic that comes into play there, right? Is you say, I know the RDSP, I don't even have to think about this question. All right, Troy, I like it. Okay, let's see that screen share. This is one of my very favorite questions. I don't know what it is that I like about this question so much, but okay, I'll cut off a little bit of the answer, but I think we'll be all right. Okay, thanks, Troy. That's good. Okay, this one, are we collection, analysis, or recommendation? This is our first real full-on recommendation question, isn't it? I think the first one where we would all agree that it is definitely recommendation. 3,000 into, okay. It actually wouldn't matter, okay? It would not matter. Where are the marks for this? It's all in the rationale. It's true. I just don't know how you would lose a mark for it, okay? It is important to pay attention to the marks. Now, first thing I'll point out is Troy did the right thing here. Maybe he noticed, maybe he didn't, where the marks come from, but I find a lot of people don't fill in the rationales. And maybe, Brian, what I should have is a total down on the bottom and give a half mark for that as well. Who knows? I don't know where else I could dock a mark for not getting that total of 10,000. The template constrains the student, but it also constrains the grader. All right, what do we think of this first rationale? I don't think I've ever actually seen that answer before. That's interesting. I just don't know where to knock the mark off because it doesn't, Cameron. Okay. Yeah, now that's not the answer that Troy gave. Troy didn't talk about maximizing the grant money. Troy says the grants will kick in here and help to increase that, but really is making the argument that for URI, because the grants, we don't need to put so much money in. I like this answer. Most people give an answer more like what you're suggesting, Jamie. Most people will say something like, that's where you get the optimal amount of grants. But I like this. I think that's a good answer. I think that's a nice rationale to say you don't need to put as much money in. The grants are going to put you in good standing. Yeah, that's fair, Cameron. You could just talk about the purpose of the money, just to save towards retirement. Okay, what about this RESP for URI with likely won't be attending school? What do we think there? Yeah, I actually think there's a justification here, Shelley. If I really actually had URI as a client or Peter and Cindy as a client, I would be prioritizing the RESP over the RDSP. I find for younger children, this is generally the better step. However, on the exam, this is probably a fine answer because the question does point to, or the scenario does point to a serious learning disability. And I think I would mark this right, as much as I don't like this. Okay. It's true, Shelley, and I don't really care about the grants. That's not, whatever. The grants are a nice incentive to save. What I care about is that we have money available for education. Okay, so I may not like this answer, but I think I would mark it right. The scenario does paint this picture. Okay. There's no template response. I don't know what you mean, Boston. Yeah, you could possibly do that. Or he might actually go to school. Yuri could end up in school. This is not out of the question. And in fact, if Yuri ends up in school, his schooling is likely to be more expensive than Alex's. Okay. I like planning from a position of optimism. I think that we should be talking to these parents about cases where kids like Yuri end up going on to post-secondary programs or some version of that and end up using the RESP. Yeah, I don't like to give up on that prospect of post-secondary education. That being said, I would mark this correct. Okay, that's good. What about the $2,000 into Alex's RESP? Yeah, I'm not sure if I like this answer. Sure, I think 2,500 can work here fine. I think 2,500 is a valid answer. I think this is an assumption. I don't know what the basis for saying that is other than an assumption. Troy, is that fair? I would not give you a mark for that one. I think that you'd have to point to, yeah, and we don't know they've done that, Troy. All the question says, is there good savers? It doesn't say that they have calculated any sort of needs or anything like that. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, you could just go simple there, Cameron. Funds for Alex to go to school one day. You might say it's been important to them to save for Alex's education and they can continue doing so, something like that. Okay, or they placed a priority on saving for his education and they can continue to do so, something in that realm. Yeah. Okay, what about RSP for Peter? I think what you've given here, Troy, is really a rationale for the next answer. This is really this rationale, or at least part of this rationale. The question here is why save in Peter's RRSP? And the number one thing I would point to here is, of course, the tax deduction. And then Peter, who is self-employed, has some retirement savings. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. I never thought about that as a way to approach it. That might work. That might work, Troy. I think that maybe my perspective is limited here, but yeah, that's fair. That might be good. You could give that answer, Melissa. I think 0 is a fine answer for Peter. You're going to try and balance them out a little bit. I think that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Are we okay with the spousal RSP for Cindy? Yeah, I think that's good. I would give that mark. And of course, Peter still gets the tax deduction on that, right? Okay. Did anybody give answers other than 0 for RSP for Cindy or spouse RSP for Peter? I'm curious, Melissa, what's the answer you gave here? I think generally 0 is the, but not for Peter. You wouldn't have Cindy make a contribution to Peter's RSP, would you? These would both be zeros? No, okay, that's good. You just did. You moved essentially all the RSP money into Cindy's spousal, right? You said I'm putting everything into Cindy's spousal. Yeah. Okay, I can buy that. TFSA for Peter. I like these answers. I think these are good. I would also maybe talk about short-term flexibility. You could talk about that, Melissa. Yeah, that I think goes hand in hand with emergency fund or need for liquidity. Yeah, some tax-free growth. I think that's very close to Troy's rationale here. I would generally prefer, though, Connor, that each has money in their own TFSA. If we're talking about short-term liquidity, right? Because if Peter has something go wrong, it's hard for Cindy to access his TFSA. If Cindy has something go wrong, she loses capacity, it's hard for Peter to access her TFSA. Yeah, in marital breakdown, now everybody takes their stuff and goes their own way. Yeah, although we don't even have money for that, Brian, right? There's not even enough money on the table to max out 2 TFSAs. Okay. Good. All right, thanks. That's a fairly involved type of question. And I think it's normal. Normally people get somewhere 2, 3, 3.5 marks with it. I don't normally see 9 well done rationales here. I like this question for that reason, because I think it forces you to slow down a little bit and really ask about whether your rationale is a rationale for the answer you gave, or if you've made a bunch of assumptions here. Lots of assumptions that show up in this question. All right. Any last minute questions before we call it a day? We're on again tomorrow morning, same time. I appreciate lots of you were on time this morning. It was real nice. We're going to hopefully finish off exam number 1 tomorrow, and also the Karen and Gord question. I haven't forgotten. We'll do a little bit of multiple choice, not a ton, but a little bit of multiple choice work. We'll talk about time management quite a bit tomorrow. And even though it's still 6 weeks until exam day, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens on and around exam day and kind of how to spend that week prior to the exam. If you have other questions, bring them to class tomorrow. More than happy to go through whichever content or questions come up. We'll do a little more depreciation tomorrow. Okay. I don't know, Nelson, at least until the exam. All right, keep them coming. It's fine. I don't cut you off tomorrow, Nelson, if that's what you're getting at. You'll have access all the way through to the exam at least. And then sometimes people have questions after the exam. No problem. I have no reason to cut that off or whatever. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Cameron. Yeah, thanks everybody. Really good questions again today. Appreciate that. Appreciate the sharing. Yeah, I definitely did not get an email from you, Sharon. I 100% do not have an email from you. Okay, I'll give my email address again, but honestly, the forms are like 1,000 times better. Okay. Yeah, thanks. You can duck out then. Duck out as you see fit. And otherwise, we will see you bright and early tomorrow. Yeah, thanks so much. See ya. Okay, yeah, thanks, Sharon. All right, perfect. Yeah, everybody have a great night. I'm going to wrap up there. And yeah, we'll see you again tomorrow.